so we'll
start our introductions then. We're just waiting.
So we're going to go ahead and convene as the Water Quality District Board. We now quorum for the Water Quality District. And number one on the agenda is to introduce our new member, Josh Slotnick.
Thank you.
So welcome to the board, Josh.
Thanks, Ross.
All right.
So we got to meet and do a bit of a tour. We've got a couple steps of orientation we think we've lined out, but if you just want to introduce yourselves, that would be.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. Let's start going around the table just in the order we're sitting here to.
Sure. So I'm James Stevens. I got appointed to the board last year by the county commissioners. I guess my background is I'm the CEO of Blue Marble Biomaterials/Energy. I do a lot of other things, so department consulting, federal consulting, global consulting now, public health, infectious disease, biochemistry, compounds, you name it. I'm probably involved in it for some reason because someone's tricked me into doing something. Never again volunteer yourself is what I keep joking every day now when I go to stuff. But yeah, because that's my background is kind of to bring more, I guess maybe industry and kind of application viewpoint to the board.
And James is actually one of two citizen appointees that are appointed by the county commissioners.
Great. Okay.
I think I have 2 years left on my term, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, it goes on.
Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah, I'm Ross Miller. I just got reappointed. I've served for 12 years now. Got reappointed for another 3-year term. As background, I'm now a lawyer. I do mostly water law and environmental law. I'm a reformed hydrogeologist with lots of experience in modeling groundwater systems throughout western Montana and the state. Before that, I served for about, 15 years or so with the Water Quality Advisory Council. So I've been kind of involved with this group since the late 80s, mid to late 80s. So.
I'm Debbie Johnson, and I want to reassure you, Russ has always been a lawyer. He said, I am now a lawyer. I think you were before. And we are both appointees from the city council. I'm on my 3rd term. I think I've been on the board for 9 years. I served on the Water Quality Advisory Council before I came on the board. And I, in my day job, I'm a civil engineer, so I do, design of roads, water, sewer type of projects.
Who do you work with?
Morrison Maryland is my day job. So, yeah.
And I'm Pat Boyd. I got appointed by the county commissioners last year, so this is going into my 2nd year. I'm a nurse practitioner. I teach at Missoula College. I teach nursing at Missoula College, and I have a degree in geology and mammalian ecology before I became a nurse, so it helps me a little bit to work on the board. So I used to work in the health department years ago as a public health nurse, so my perspective from the board is maternal child health and my background.
Thanks.
Hi, Josh.
Good to see you.
You too.
All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to our first action item, which is item number 2, which is approved comment letter on definition of waters of the United States. And Travis, you gonna help us through that a bit? Guide us through that.
Sorry, I just ran up the stairs, so forgive my mistake. So this came in response to a journal article prepared last month, and the advisory council looked at this as well. Excuse me. The changes to the Clean Water Rule from 2015 change the definition of waters of the U.S. to not include intermittent streams and wetlands. And so this is the letter before you to oppose those changes. Sorry.
Travis, you're making me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
I always get out of breath on those too.
I'm glad. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that, but The board in 2014, this was the last revisions to the Clean Water Rule, supported those changes because it officially recognized that intermittent streams, ephemeral streams, wetlands that are geographically disconnected from free-flowing perennial streams and traditional navigable waters are in fact connected. They provide a lot of valuable services and wetlands uptake nutrients, remove sediments, buffer flood capacities on larger streams. So this 2018 proposed revision removes those protections, those Clean Water Act protections. Montana's own constitution guarantees that our citizens have the right to a clean and healthful environment and protected waters. We have a state Water Quality Act, which does provide some protections as well, but the Federal Clean Water Act is kind of a backstop. It really, if changes to the state legislature were to remove some of our surface water protections, we would not have the backstop of the Clean Water Rule or the Clean Water Act, and specifically these intermittent streams and wetlands. So the protections come in the form of discharge regulations, permitted discharges to surface waters, wetlands, streams. It also comes in the form of the Corps of Engineers dredge and fill permitting requirements. So if say there was, well, in Montana, many of our streams are actually ephemeral intermittent streams. So even Lolo from time to time goes dry. So if Montana did not have its own regulations to prohibit dredging, filling, bank work, then the Clean Water Act, if changed, would not protect that as well. So it is important to have that second layer of protection. Let's see. This came about, I mean, this has gone back and forth between administrations. It started with a couple of Supreme Court rulings. In fact, after the last 2015 Clean Water Rule change, it was challenged in court, and Montana Attorney General joined in that suit. So it's ultimately going to need to be decided by the Supreme Court what in fact streams are protected under this act. But this is a backslide, really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Water Quality the Water Quality Advisory Council did prepare some kind of more detailed analysis of the potential impacts, which is addressed to this board, and then drafted a letter for consideration from this board to the water docket.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. Just one question or comment on the first paragraph. It states the Missoula Valley Water Quality District Board opposes the draft Clean Water Act guidance issued by EPA and the United States Corps of Engineers on December 11, 2018. I think that's referring to an op-ed that was basically kind of functioned as the public notice or press release on this. I'm wondering.
And wasn't it in some random Midwest paper?
It was a Kansas City Star. Since then, they do, if you pull up EPA's website now, there is a more formal press release. And that gets to my comment. My understanding is it would be more accurate to say, and I kind of took a crack at rewriting that first paragraph. So here's my proposal for consideration. I want to see what you think of that, Travis. The Missoula Valley Water Quality District Board opposes the proposed revised definition of, quote, waters of the United States, unquote, published in the Federal Register, Volume 83, number 248, Friday, December 28, 2018, / proposed rules. Because it is a proposed rule. My understanding is it's not a proposed guidance.
No, you're right.
It's a proposed rule, and it's currently published in the Federal Register as a proposed rule, and its
Right.
publication date was December 28. So just to kind of try to be as absolutely accurate as we can. So my question is, do you think that's a more accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That is a better way to phrase that. I would agree.
Okay.
This is actually a draft rule. Yeah. I
Okay.
would concur with that. One thing to note, this gets, of course, it's very political, but one of the statements that you hear a lot is that it is at a detriment to the ag community. The 2015 Clean Water Rule actually does include exemptions for agricultural ditches and conveyances that were in place prior to that rule. So it's just something to keep in mind as that this gets debated back and forth, that there are agricultural exemptions, and this is not in any way was not intended to regulate puddles or roadside ditches. So no. So it's truly meant at recognizing what we know, that wetlands and ephemeral streams are connected to.
And from what I remember, the 2015 rule is pretty much to stop polluters from discharging into intermittent streams without a permit. So I think that was
And
the original
dredging.
plan, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I believe pothole wetlands.
Yeah.
Yes, great
Mm-hmm.
couples. Yeah. It was an extensive rule, and for sure this proposal is condensed, but too much so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any other?
Just with the changes, what's the date for the comment? What's the comment period date? So it was 28, you said 28 December?
60-day comment.
I believe it was a 60-day comment period
Mhm, it is.
that would have started December 28th.
Yeah, I just
Probably.
went with that earliest
Today.
notice I saw.
I thought it was earlier than that because it was before our last meeting. So I thought we were concerned that we wouldn't have our February meeting in time to actually respond, which is why we wanted to get it done in this meeting.
I
That's
think
what I
we're-
recall.
That's my memory.
I think you're right, and I think what we were going by was
The op-ed.
the op-ed,
Not
which
the-
was dated December 11th.
Okay, that's right.
But then I just checked on the EPA site in the last few days, and it looks like it came out as a proposed rule on December 28th.
Okay.
So I'm thinking we have them, but then again, I think we're prepared to act today. I mean, if all we're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
is
yeah.
doing
Yeah.
a
Sure, yeah.
edit, we can get that done today.
Yep, agreed.
Would be my proposal.
Ross, can you read your proposed changes one more time?
I can, and I've got it in red line here as
Okay,
well, so I can
thank
just
you.
hand it to you in writing as
That'd be
well.
great.
So again, I'll, to Julie's request, I'll read it. The Missoula, the proposed language is, the Missoula Valley Water Quality District Board opposes the proposed revised definition of, quote, waters of the United States, unquote, published in the Federal Register, Volume 83, number 248, / Friday, December 28, 2018, / proposed rules. And I
Thank you.
believe that's the correct citation to the Federal Register as published it. But I'll hand this red line to you as
Thank
well,
you.
Julie. And then Travis, is it just logistically, is that gonna work to get that done
Yeah.
this afternoon?
I could just go.
'Cause that'd be
go
a-
that now. Those notes.
So, all right.
So
I'm going to
actually,
pass
if
that
we-
down.
Yeah, if you want to give them to Travis,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
can go fix it.
All righty.
So I'd move to approve the comment letter on the definition of the waters of the U.S. as amended here today and authorize the chair to sign.
Any board or staff comments or discussion on the motion? Any public comments or discussion on the motion? Yes?
Are you also gonna send this letter to like our federal representatives and the state water?
Yes.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, I see on the letter itself, we have CC to Senator Steve Dane, Senator John Tester, Congressman Greg Gianforte, and the National Association of Counties. And then it's addressed to the EPA with the attention to the particular docket number.
What about adding the state regulatory agency to
Certainly at
Just,
DEQ.
DEQ,
yeah,
We
just in
could.
case
Water
they're not.
Protection Bureau.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's outside of their jurisdiction, but it wouldn't hurt to
Yeah.
let them know what we think about it.
Sure, at the Water Protection Bureau.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you bet. Any other public comments on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right, so we'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the December 20 minutes.
And those are not ready.
Okay, so then we move on to item number 4, which is Water Quality Advisory Council update. So Travis, you don't have to move.
Okay, perfect. So, and I've caught my breath, so this is better too. So a large part of the last advisory council meeting was discussing the implications of the proposed rule, and that got far more discussion than I anticipated, actually. I think we ended up with a consensus on what it meant, but it was a good discussion of what state rules are in place that provide that additional layer. And in addition to that, we discussed the Clark Fork Coalition has put together, if you recall, the Water Quality District completed a watershed restoration plan for Miller Creek, and the Clark Fork Coalition followed up on that with a more detailed assessment, including some temperature monitors and flow monitoring stations on Miller Creek, and have developed some more detailed project restoration projects on Miller Creek. So they shared with us their findings on that report. A lot of work will be coming into Miller Creek because of the 319 designation that we talked about last month. And
What's that mean?
okay, sure, sorry. So the Department of Environmental Quality has a non-point source program that addresses really those sources of contamination to waterways that are not attributed to like a wastewater treatment plant or a stormwater discharge. And so this is federal funding that gets pushed down to to DEQ, which then distributes it throughout the state. So DEQ is taking up a different approach with distributing that funding and targeting specific watersheds. And this year, this is the pilot program. They're targeting the Bitterroot. So up to 50% of those restoration dollars will be directed at the Bitterroot, which works out really well because this watershed restoration plan has been completed for Miller Creek. One has been done for Lolo Creek and Bitterroot. So
Who applies for that money?
So local governments can apply for them, nonprofits can apply for them, private landowners can apply for them.
Great.
Yeah, it's meant to be a very local effort because that's, you know, in the end, these projects largely take place on private property. So it takes kind of local groups to build those relationships with private property owners to build a project to get funding. So,
That's great.
so several are getting in line to.
How much money are we talking about for that?
DEQ hasn't released how much they're intending to spend yet on it, but it's in the hundreds of thousands.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I believe that's it for the advisory council this month.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Travis.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up most of our items, so then we move on to public comments on items not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to board and staff comments on items not on the agenda.
I actually have a question or pseudo request. So being roped into a million projects, one of the projects I got asked to participate in with is a global cosmetics company is doing a bunch of ocean plastic recycling back into their containers and material like that. However, looking at the toxicology reports, I have a concern with partially degraded plastic being put back into products that end up on the shelves for leaching that material back into the watersheds. And it's not super important, but it's something if anybody wants to provide some guidance or help, or if there's any knowledge on how that goes, I'd love to be able to feed that information back into like their deciding councils and all that kind of stuff from that aspect, because there's all this new innovation delivering new products on the shelf every day, and I'll probably make some other comments and later down the board from that aspect. But I would, from a water quality perspective, I was thinking about that pretty heavily about what are the ramifications of partially degraded plastic being utilized in material, cosmetics, shampoo, all that kind of stuff from that aspect, and entering back into like mainly our watershed. So that was my biggest concern, because I know there's endocrine disruptors and stuff that can end up with fish populations and all that. So, and when I brought that up, no one had even thought about that when I was sitting in the meeting. So, and then everyone's like, leave, because you think about stuff no one wants to think about.
We could probably start by asking Todd C.
Yeah, I figured you guys might actually know quite a bit of information on that
His
from
PhD is in toxicology.
Yeah. But it was kind of a request. I'm like, I don't know anything about it, so if someone knows something more than I do, I'd love to get some information or have a different meeting.
Work on that.
All right, thanks, James. Any other board or staff comments on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Water Quality District Board, and we will convene as the Board of Health. Do we have December 20 minutes?
No.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is an action item, which is approve the Maternal Child Health Advisory Council to serve as the advisory council for Nurse Family Partnership. And Pam and Ellen are gonna guide us through
Well,
that?
go ahead. the board approved the new charge.
So we had
Last
to have
month.
the new charge in place before we could make a decision about whether or not we wanted to serve as the advisory board. And so that was a big part of our discussions at the meeting this month, was whether or not we wanted to do that. And we decided that yes, we did, and that we would like the board's approval for us to take that role. So I'm proposing that the Maternal Child Advisory Council serve as the Nurse Practice Partnership Programs Advisory Board.
Okay. All right, thanks, Pam. Any board or staff discussion?
I have a question. So what's it gonna involve? So you guys have your regular advisory council meetings,
Right.
and then you'll attend both of these boards to give updates? Is there, what more
So
are they asking
what they
for?
had, they have not had a lot of guidance from the board that they currently have as far as project, ideas for how they could implement things and things like that. And they felt that it was a good home here in the health department because we address those issues anyway, and that we might have some better ways for them to tie in what they're doing with the things that are already in place and people that are in place, and that we would actually have a more active role in doing that with them more specifically than the group that they're in. So,
I agree. The model, the evidence-based model, which Nurse Family Practice is, does require an advisory group. They call it an advisory board, which I think is confusing because I always think boards are governing, but it's an advisory board. And so I think two things are being improved upon here. They're not getting the guidance. And number two, we can, rather than try to pump that up, we can use a very long-standing, and I think particularly with your involvement, reinvigorated advisory council for NFP. Not try to duplicate.
Thanks. Any other board or staff comments?
Can you just give me a couple sentences on what the Nurse Family Partnership is?
Mhm.
go ahead.
It's a program aimed at improving pregnancy and early childhood health outcomes. And it is, the evidence base in terms of those outcomes are the highest caliber of any of that type of program. Its main method of delivery is in home visiting. It's not the only method.
They visit women who are 28 weeks pregnant till their children are 2 years of age.
Mhm.
And they have regular scheduled visits with them and to help them with a
Right.
huge variety of things.
So Missoula is partnered with 4 other counties, Missoula and Yellowstone. First brought it to the state. It needed that kind of, that level of infrastructure and clientele. So long story short, now we also have 3 other counties that are part of the Nurse Family Partnership. And
How often does a person get visited?
It kind of depends. They try to do a regular, I think, weekly visit to start with. But if that doesn't fit the dynamics of the family that they're visiting, then that's adjusted. But
it's
they-
very high intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I-
this is for whoever asks for this service.
Well, they have to meet the eligibility of the model that was researched and that we saw the good outcomes on. So for example, and there is some income eligibility as well. But for example, a woman who is in her 3rd trimester is not eligible for this particular approach. We don't say we don't serve you, but for this particular model, because we have to have them at least in their, no later than their 2nd trimester in order to say that we're going to see the outcomes. And I'd gladly send you, I try to keep it to 1 page.
Yeah, good, perfect.
But, generally, if you see a improved outcome of something like 7 or 9% on something like not using the emergency room or not getting involved with the criminal justice system, if you see those kinds of things, you're usually happy. The outcome measures for Nurse Family Partnership are in the double digits. I mean, if you think of it as a vaccine, this is the strongest vaccine for preventing all those negative outcomes. But it is, it's very intense, and the fidelity to the model, the requirements are very strict. So I'd gladly send you some of that. So we're real proud to keep it going, not only in Missoula, but in other places in the state.
Great, and now we have a better advisory board for it.
Yeah, we have an advisory board and a better one.
Only if we approve it, right?
Thank you.
Who's on the Maternal Child Health Advisory Council?
That list is probably not updated in your book, but it's updated in your book.
Blair Davis.
I didn't bring my book.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not updated in your book yet either
I guess
because
I'm just
they.
curious generally who.
Yeah,
the number
so
of member
we
changes.
have a MD psychiatrist, happens to be the chair, and she specializes in pediatric psychiatry, Blair Davison, and we have usually we have Pam and her background, and of course it's liaison.
And
Pediatrician.
There's a pediatrician, and there is a student usually.
Mhm.
We don't have one on currently, but that's the hope that we will get one soon. And there's a person who is in the Native American community who is a liaison that is on the board, although I haven't.
Right.
Yet, but she's there. There's
It's pretty broad. We usually have someone in some of the social services. It's pretty
There's
broadly
a nurse
represented.
from Sealy Lake.
Mhm.
We've had some problems that was a big part of what was at the meeting as well, how we can kind of make the board function better, or the council function better than it has been. A lot of people don't show up on a regular basis, and so we're trying to discuss and figure out how we can get a better participation from a broader segment of the people who are on the board, but just don't come.
Could we tap into the city county's teleconferencing tools for that to try to improve?
Yeah, we have our own. I
Yeah.
mean, we certainly could.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
And would certainly help for the Sealy Lake one.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
A day like today.
And I've been on the council for a year now, and I have not met her till the last meeting, so.
Yeah.
That's.
We actually use those tools for the 5-county Nurse Family Partnership administrative meetings. So we
So
could
it's a
use them.
possibility. So we're in the midst of discussing those kinds of things and trying to figure out and kind of beef back up the board to where it should, or the council to where it should be. So.
Excellent.
Thanks, man. Any other border staff comments? So, trying to remember, so you put that out as a motion, is that correct?
I did.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor. Any public comments on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
All right. So, that's a great segue to item number 3, which is maternal child health advisory council update.
And I've pretty much told you everything
Okay.
that we're talking
There
about.
you go.
So we, we had the new charge, so we discussed the charge and talked about why the clause for closed meeting and stuff was taken out. And then we talked about the board and the configuration of the board and how we could get it to be a better thing and who we need to ask to participate. So that was a lot of the discussion, and then made the decision about whether we would serve as the advisory board for the partnership program, and so that was the majority of it. We did find out that there is a new full-time public health nurse that is being hired, so they were in the midst of doing interviews for that, so that was like, yay, one back.
Yeah.
So, but that was pretty much the gist of the meeting, so.
All right,
Yep.
thanks, Pam. So
Julie
then,
has a question.
Oh, I was just going to add a comment that in your efforts to revitalize the advisory council, they have reached out and they have some reappointment letters for, I think, 4 members there for Ross to sign, which we'll get back to staff today. So
oh, okay, I see him here. Okay,
they're making some progress on reappointing some existing members.
okay, great. Got those right here. All right, thanks. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, monthly updates on strategic priorities. We got section 1, which is goal 6, decrease the overall number of completed suicides in Missoula County.
Just text
Is
me.
Nancy here? Should we,
Yeah.
pardon, is Nancy here? Or?
She's on her way, but
Okay.
Jeff is
Jeff
here.
Oh, we got Jeff here, so we'll
Part
skip
B.
to part B, section 2, environmental health, the animal control goals 3 and 4, and Jeff is gonna walk us through that.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've been battling a cold like half of Missoula, so
Yeah.
I'm on my last cough drop, so. I'll give you an update on our strategic plan from animal control. Just a little background, if you aren't familiar. We're out on Butler Creek, and our facility is about 17 years old, so we're starting to feel some of the things that need to be replaced. For example, we're replacing a boiler in the next couple months. Luckily, we have the money to pay for a $27,000 boiler, but some of those things are starting to, so that is one of our goals. Goal 3 is to complete and implement a plan of improvements to the animal control facility that will improve staff's ability to safely handle animals, increase shelter capacity to prevent overcrowding, provide more opportunities for the public to interact with potential pets, and take ASPCA recommendations into account. Now, our first objective, which we want to try to get to by the end of June of this year, is to finalize a 3-year facility improvement plan that addresses the goals of safely handling animals, increasing shelter capacity, enhancing public interaction with potential pets, and implement some ASPCA recommendations. So with that, the actions that we want to use to accomplish that objective is we want to participate in an inspection of the ASPCA. And we've done that this last fall. Dr. Aziz came and inspected our facility and gave us a lot of recommendations on how to run a more efficient and safer facility. So we've taken note of those suggestions. Discuss potential improvements with the Missoula Animal Control Board. Animal control, we have our own board, such as the health board, we have an animal control board. So when we talk about these suggestions for improvements and safer handling, we're discussing that with our board. We do that, we meet every 2 months with our board. So we discuss that at each meeting. And we are going to search for grants that can help fund some of these improvements. Just recently, we were able to get $10,000 from our nonprofit to help build a play yard for dogs. Up until this point, if you wanted to experience one of our dogs, you had to put it on a leash and take it outside. And now with a 30 feet by 100 feet play yard, you can actually take it out there and let it off the leash and interact with it a little bit. And the only bad side about that is it's right outside my window. It's very distracting, but it's kind of cool. Objective 2 here is by June 30th, implement a strategy that will give the public a positive way to interact with potential pets, and that was construct the play yard. We've got it constructed. We still have some final touches that we want to put on it, such as sod and plant some shrubbery around it, maybe some benches, but the public's already using it. Even with weather like today, people are still using it. So we think that's a great addition. We've got that done. Goal 4 for animal control, we have 2 main goals. This is our second one. And it's to increase the total number of vaccinated and licensed dogs in Missoula County by 18%. Right now, we're just a little over 16,000 dogs that are licensed. We'd like to get to a little under 19,000 to reduce the public health risk of rabies exposure to both humans and dogs. Objective 1, we'd like to have done by the end of June. It's going to be tough to get there. We'd like to increase the number of dog licenses by 6%. So that would be from 16,000 to 17,600 licenses. Part of the reason it's going to be tough to get there is one of the most effective ways for us to spread the word of licensing, both through education and just uncovering the fact that people have dogs and they're not licensing them, is through our census program. And we haven't had any census workers for about 3 months.
Just saw it posted.
Yeah, we have a posting. And the problem with that is they've been part-time positions, and it's really hard to keep a person in a part-time position.
Are you the person who does the hiring?
Yeah.
I just sent somebody your way.
Good, good. Well, what we did this time, in conjunction with talking with HR, was to take away the 2 half-time positions and make them a full-time position. And we've had really good people in the half-time positions, and they give us really good ideas. And we get cooking, and then they quit and leave for a full-time job. So we're hoping by making it a full-time position, we can keep somebody there a little longer.
Is this a full-time job for the length of the project, or is this an annual?
It's annual, yeah.
And is this census program the program where people go on people's property and look in their backyards and annoy homeowners in Montana?
I think they knock on the door.
Yeah, that's not in the job description, but.
Yeah, so.
Trespass is in the job.
Yeah, well, I
You're
just.
thinking of something else, James.
Yeah, that's, it could be. So I guess thinking about to the Board of Health's whole thing with community involvement and community perspective, I'd be very much interested in trying to find a way to get the compliance up on licensing without such an invasive census program, because that's the #1 complaint I hear about people once they know I'm on the health board and they know that health board does stuff with animal control. It's like, well, those guys peek over our fence and invade our privacy to see if we have dogs or not.
Well.
And so I'm not,
Yeah.
whatever,
I would
license your dog.
I would suggest, to talk to us about that.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What does happen is my staff goes to the door, knocks on the door, and the people aren't home, fluffy, and.
They bark and do
they
whatever,
bark,
yeah.
and they jump up on the couch and look out the window, and it's pretty easy to see those 2 dogs. You don't have to stand on your tiptoes.
I think the issue is perception's reality when it comes to people's perception. So if they think you're coming to your house and peeking over your fence and invading their privacy, they get annoyed. And we did talk a lot during the planning strategy about trying to adjust people's perception of the health board and whatever away from, hey, you're trying to enforce all these horrible rules that no one likes. If there's a way we can get compliance up without having it at least having to feel necessarily like an invasion of privacy.
Well, we did do a quality improvement project that
Yeah.
had a number of angles in it and a number of improvements. And I won't go over all of them right now, but we could go over that with you, and the way that the communication happens and the way that the follow-up happens. the way the letter is written, giving people a quote, free license rather than dinging them and then give, 90 days. So there was a lot of different improvements that went into that,
Cool,
and
yeah.
licensing did go up highly, so.
And then, from a compliance perspective, I'm a percentage statistical guy, of like how many people are licensed and how many, your census, or at least your last census, is it like 10% of the population's
Well,
licensed, 80%?
One of our problems has been that without any way to know what's out there, we don't have the very necessary denominator.
Yeah,
And we keep looking at our performance measures, hoping that we get to the point where we actually have a denominator, and our performance measure would actually be a percentage.
Okay, cool.
And not a raw number increase.
Gotcha.
So the best we have to go by are the national averages of dog
Okay.
ownership now, and our own sense that it's probably higher in Missoula. That's not a mathematical answer,
I'm,
but
yeah. No,
it's the real answer.
I'm the worst person in the world for actually like achievable KPIs.
I love
Everyone's been smacking me around and being like, make KPIs achievable. And so I'm like, well, let's run the numbers and see if the KPIs are
Yeah.
achievable, because I don't want to have anything lined up where like 18% is impossible,
Yeah.
or whatever the number was.
It is one of the difficult things when you're
Yeah.
always trying to use metrics and you're diving into an area in which next to no metrics exist,
Yeah.
is you kind of have to dig your way through and evolve those metrics.
Yeah, because I have no idea if 18% is reasonable or not.
Right, we
Like-
really would like to get a denominator
What's
someday.
what's the national average?
For Missoula, if you use the formula that they have, and we do have some pretty good census data, and that's part of what the census stuff does.
Yeah,
It's
we'll get
more than
there.
just enforcing licenses. It tells us where the dogs are in the community and how many dogs there are. We feel there are about 50,000 dogs in Missoula County, and we have 16,000 licensed, so compliance is poor, but compared to the United States average, our compliance is fairly high. For example, San Francisco's compliance is generally less than 7%, and we feel that we're over 20%. So educate, but you've had to license your dog in Missoula, Montana since the late 1800s. So it's not new. It's just it's what it is it's a tax, and people don't want to pay it, and they don't pay it until they get their arm caught, and so you got to pay it. Fishing licenses were the same way. I saw it for 30 years. A lot of people didn't buy them because they thought they'd never see a game on them. So we're trying all different types of tactics, educate, free licenses, and I'll get to this other thing that kind of goes with it.
Thank you very much.
You bet. One of the other things that, census is one of the items that we use to increase licenses. The other thing is officer patrols in high use areas such as parks. One of our goals was to do at least 600 park patrols. We did over 700 so far this fiscal year. Another thing for us was to use a call service. This was one of the benefits of having one of these sharp part-time people. We were making phone calls to tell people their dog license was due, and that's just the way it was done. And this sharp person came to me and said, "Why are we doing this?" So, well, that's the way it's always been done. And she said, "Well, let's put it on a call system so people get a phone call that says, hey, your dog license is due." And we did, and it saved a lot of work with our staff to do that. So we've been able to implement that. Objective 2 here is improve Missoula County dog owners' access to affordable rabies vaccinations for their pets. And one of the things that we do is we have a veterinarian on contract, and we're trying to hold a low-cost rabies vaccination clinic once a month. We can't do it next month because the vet's on vacation. But last year, we were able to provide 936 low-cost rabies vaccinations to citizens of Missoula County. And what I mean by low cost is the vet charges us $10 a shot, and we charge $3 to cover the cost of the vaccine. So it's $13 to get a rabies vaccination. The only hook is you have to license your dog before you leave. So you get a rabies vaccination for $13, and if your dog is bigger or altered, it's another $20. So for $33, you get your dog in compliance and vaccinated.
How do we tell Missoula that this is happening?
We have it on our Facebook page, and to be honest, I can't advertise it. because we're so busy right now, we'll give between 70 and 100 vaccinations in a 3-hour period.
So if you advertised it, you wouldn't have the capacity to
Right.
make it.
Yeah, we'd have a long line of angry people.
Yeah, and I mean, if you come out there on a vaccination clinic day, our parking lot is full, and Butler Creek is parked along Butler Creek.
So you don't need to
I
get
don't,
the word.
yeah, the word is out, and people call and make reservations to get slots, and we fill up. So it's very successful. Along with that, our spay-neuter efforts, we also have a low-cost spay-neuter program, and we altered 607 public animals last year through our spay-neuter program, which basically you can get a dog or a cat spayed and neutered for $45, and that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
You know.
Super cheap.
So it saves their, they get vaccinated when they're there for that spay-neuter effort, and it saves on the population of animals. Another thing that we'd like to accomplish is 2 of these vaccination clinics in outlying communities such as Cedar Lake and Frenchtown, see what we can get there. That's kind of a big where we're at.
Right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Julie, did you?
Call me. I have suggestions for you.
Okay.
We won't get into it here, but I think we can get the vets and daycare centers on board where you could do out-call sessions to them for a couple hours a month and
Okay.
multiply your efforts.
You do go. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
So we move back to item A. So we'll move back up to item A with Nancy DiPastino. Great, thanks Nancy. And she's gonna guide us. Nancy's gonna guide us through section 1, community health, goal 6 update. Decrease overall number of completed suicides in Missoula County by 10%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do have some slides, if you guys can.
The left one.
There you go. Thank you. So I'm just. Okay, thanks for your patience with me. I'm Nancy DePastino, and I'm the Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the Health Department. So thanks for having me here to talk a little bit about our strategic priorities for 2019. We have a big goal to decrease suicides in Missoula County by 10%. And just to give you a sense of the numbers that we're working with, in 2018, there were 28 completed suicides in Missoula County. Compare that to in 2017, 31, and in 2016, 34. So we're on the right trajectory, but we would like to go much further down. Of the 28 completed suicides in 2018, 75% of them were by firearm. And I think it's important to note that the national average of suicides by firearm is 50%. 79% were male, compared to, that's pretty on par with national average of about 75% of suicides are male.
I have a question. Do you have an overlay of toxicology information on this well too, either substance abuse or alcohol or whatever?
Do I have an
Do you,
overlay?
yeah, do you have the toxicology overlay? So not only firearm, but.
I don't have that in my slides
okay.
today, but.
I mean, is the information available, I guess,
It
is
is
my question.
available from
Okay.
the sheriff's office, yeah, so I can help
Just
provide
one
that.
general question.
Yeah.
How do our suicide numbers compare to other places in the United States of similar size?
We are the #1 state in suicides.
Number
right
one
now.
worst.
Not as
And
Missoula
for
County.
comparable
the state.
population wise,
I don't know about the county.
I'm not
I don't know
exactly
county to
sure.
county.
County center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
worst of,
We're the
Worst.
worst of the worst.
Missoula
Yeah.
counties.
I think per
Yes.
capita we're,
Yeah.
The worst county.
It's in our community health assessment, but I.
yeah.
Well, there are some higher rates of suicide within Montana.
Right, these are
but
raw
it's-
numbers.
But these are raw numbers.
That's why I'm afraid
Right.
to answer without having the community health
Right.
assessment in front of me.
Yeah.
But
So we have 4 objectives to reach our goal. The first is to train 500 residents to become certified question persuader for QPR gatekeepers by the end of the year. This is our suicide intervention program that we provide for free to organizations from the health department. So we have about 12 volunteers right now working to provide that training. So first action is to reach out to all past hosts of QPR trainings, schedule new ones. So what we've done so far is, in addition to reaching out scheduling them for organizations that reach out to us, we've contacted all the past QPR hosts for new trainings. And so far, I've trained 203 Missoula residents since last July.
Can you see the duration of the QPR training?
It's
How
an
long
hour
does
and
it
a half ideally, and it can be pared down into an hour, but it's much more effective, I think, when we allow time for conversations and role play and stuff like that, so we get people to understand how to ask the difficult questions that we need to have them confident in.
What's the ideal class size on that for
About
training?
20.
Okay.
I mean, I'd like to have as many people in as possible, but to allow for good focused conversations, I think that's about 20. Which is why it takes a while to get to train 500 people. So we want to reach out to new communities to offer QPR trainings, especially for service industry professions, so bartenders and physical therapists and hairdressers and things like that. So I have 2 amazing interns in my office working on doing that outreach, and it's an ongoing effort, but they're doing great work. We want to set up and deliver QPR trainings for parents of middle and high school students, because the school's MCPS right now takes care of doing a suicide intervention training for students from 6th through 10th grade, but we don't necessarily have a complete program for parents and staff in schools. So we've so far presented to parents at Sentinel and at Meadow Hill Middle School. Turnout has been disappointing, I'm not gonna lie, and the parents who do show up express that they're concerned that there aren't more of their fellow parents there. So we're working on trying to get more people to these trainings. We want to train 10 new QPR instructors by the end of the year. So by reaching out to Project Tomorrow member organizations, Project Tomorrow is our suicide prevention coalition, to recruit new instructors and recruit MSW and public health students. So far we've trained 6 new instructors this year, which is fantastic because the new instructors have the energy and the time. It's a big time commitment that we ask people to commit to. And we have a great intern from the MSW program and the public health school.
On your turnout one too, like on the first one with schools, I'm
Yeah.
more than willing to sponsor like a pizza night or whatever, if you
Yeah.
want to do something that's gonna encourage more people to show up.
Trying to think of
Like they're gonna
ideas.
get food, 'cause
Yeah.
so I mean, if you wanna talk about that or whatever, just let me know and I can
Thank
be
you.
like, buying like 10 pizzas is not a big deal, or
Nice
20 or something to
offer.
get enough people to come, so.
There may
Yes.
be other people out there in the community who need to sponsor essentially.
Yeah, and we did, and I'll get to this, we set up some regular public QPR trainings based at the food bank. They have a beautiful community room where we can do that. And again, we just want to bring more people in, so rewarding them with food is a great idea.
So you might talk to Jane Kelly, the neighborhood,
Yeah,
because we have
yeah.
neighborhood meetings.
Yeah,
The turnout in some neighborhoods is better than others, but she could put it on the agenda if people want to stay after the meeting. They usually start about 6.
okay,
They go until 8. I know it's a little bit of a late night, but at least you've got a captive audience and there is usually food there. You might be able to at least get the start of something done.
okay, that's a great idea.
And I'll chime in like I always do, faith-based organizations are probably a good one to potentially get people who want to get trained as well too, so.
Yeah, we have reached out to a lot of faith-based organizations, but we still have plenty to reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna train and manage and support our QPR volunteers with diverse opportunities to present the training. We have revamped and improved the QPR program. It used to be very heavy kind of PowerPoint statistics, and I think it's much more effective when we're actually having conversations and figuring out why it's difficult for people to intervene in a situation. So we've tried to make it more interactive, make it more effective, give people the empowered sense that they really could do a suicide intervention. And so, and like I said, we've set up these regular public training opportunities. And then the final action on that is to mentor a suicide prevention intern from UM. We have 2 excellent interns in my office who've done amazing work to improve QPR and to broaden that reach. And they're both working 15 hours a week in my office, and I could not be more grateful for that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Objective 3 is to educate and advocate to elected officials on lethal means restrictions. I'm gonna just jump back to that idea that 79% of our suicides in Missoula County were by firearm. Means matter, and we need to educate our elected officials and talk about legislation that could help in that. So action 1 is to present in front of the city council and the county commissioners on legislation that might help with this. My plan is to work on this after the legislative session ends to see what the state legislature does to take care of it. Crossing my fingers still. And then also to testify in front of the Montana State Legislature on any bills that would help in suicide prevention. So far I've done a lot of research on upcoming and potential bills. The 3 that I have identified that I think would be most effective to help in this work are a red flags law, which is also called an emergency response protective order, which is basically an order where a family member or law enforcement can petition for a court order to remove firearms from somebody who's in crisis. So somebody who has expressed intention to kill themselves or to kill other people, law enforcement could then remove firearms on a temporary basis up to a year from that person and keep them safe. Currently, they don't have that kind of power to do that. Law enforcement doesn't have that power. Another bill is it's funding for grant programs that would be run through the Office of Public Instruction for depression screening in schools. And a third is also asking for appropriations for the state suicide prevention coordinator, Carl Roston, to be able to give grants out to youth-based, evidence-based youth suicide prevention programs. So excited to see where those go. And then finally, our last objective is to increase our visibility and branding of Project Tomorrow by placing some op-eds by the end of 2019. So first action is to just identify 3 community stakeholders to co-author those op-eds with me. I've had some great outreach through our Project Tomorrow monthly meetings, and that's there's so many people to help do this. It's going to be hard to choose the right 3. And then finally to write and place those op-eds. I want to strategically do that, so we're promoting our legislative goals, promoting the good programs we have at MCPS, like the Good Behavior Game, and then also just promotion of Project Tomorrow, so people know that we're out there and doing the work that we are doing. So, happy to answer any questions.
The training you're describing,
Yeah.
Do you guys work with Residence Life University?
We don't.
Oh my gosh,
No.
that would be such a good one.
Yeah.
They have, this is for my old life.
Yeah.
The people at Res Life could make going to this training a requirement for
Okay.
all the people who are RAs. I'm sure they would love it.
Okay, great.
They're really easy to work with.
Will do.
It's such an issue there.
Yep.
You can reach thousands of young people in 1 week.
That's great. Great suggestion. Thanks, Josh. Okay, I'll get back to work.
Any discussion? Thank you, Nancy. All right. All right. Now we move on to subsection C, section 3 assets that Ellen is going to.
Actually, Julie's going to do that.
Julie's
She's the
going to do
one
this?
moving the pieces.
So, section 3 of the year 1 work plan addresses assets, internal capacity, and support systems, and this particular goal is specific to information technology. The goal is to adopt newer technologies for document sharing and linkages to web posting. So why do we have this goal? Well, Missoula County wants to migrate all of the county file storage from network servers to cloud-based products and to another application called OnBase. So naturally, we need to be a participant in this long-term plan. And our first objective is to migrate all of our health department staff to the county's new SharePoint platform by June 30th of 2020. Our first action is to participate in county SharePoint planning meetings, and those meetings are largely arranged by Information Systems, one of our county departments, and they're also involving a lot of participation by their communications department. So to get started, we actually, for the department's involvement in SharePoint transition, we kicked off with a number of county departments having staff attend who are involved with supporting different boards. So County Commissioner's Office staff, myself for our 3 boards, and then folks who represent community councils and some of the other types of boards and advisory councils that are connected to the county. We began meeting back in August and met through October, and our initial efforts were to address specifically how SharePoint should be set up just for boards, not for departments at large. We've had some good meetings, generated a lot of ideas. The county has an excellent staff member who came from Microsoft, who is a SharePoint expert. Her name's Jamie Hand, and she's been mapping out and setting up the structure for using SharePoint for different board purposes. So since October, she has worked with me and with Emily Larson in the Water Quality District to begin laying out SharePoint for the boards and the 3 advisory councils. We have been working to start populating files to SharePoint. So in this particular instance, what we're trying largely to do to get started is populate agenda and minutes files to SharePoint rather than uploading the files to the county's website. The website product is very limited in its capacity to store files, and we've, in the 3 to 4 years that we've been using this product, started to encounter a lot of difficulties when you actually upload your document and then you're trying to create your hyperlinks. Many things have been going wrong, and they haven't had as much success as they would have hoped early on to work with the vendor to alleviate those problems. So we're moving files out of the website software into SharePoint. It does mean that we have to recreate all of our hyperlinks in the different web pages. So it's a little bit of undo and redo to get started. But we're making some progress. We're still working on getting board minutes fully loaded and up to date. I believe Emily's been able to get all of the advisory council work done for water. And I need to be checking in with Sarah Cofield to see how it's going for air. And then I'm helping health services to migrate the maternal child health information. So we've started off with this board's focus. We're continuing to work on things. Jamie Hand and I actually meet tomorrow to go through some issues that have come up as I'm trying to use the SharePoint. So IS is being very responsive when we're having problems to try and help us get those worked out and resolved. The second phase for the health department is to actually start moving the entire department over to a setup where we can begin using SharePoint. So the idea is to move files so they're not all sitting on network servers. It's expensive, that technology's becoming passé and so forth. And they want to move us into use of SharePoint and OneDrive, another Microsoft product, which are both in the cloud, and then for long-term archiving of documents to work with another product called OnBase. To get the department going, we had our first meeting in December. Ellen attended, division directors attended. I also attended, and then we had Jamie from IS and Gail Hahn from County Communications. And we started mapping out, why are we trying to do this? How do we get there? What do we do preliminarily to start helping the different divisions within the department to determine how we're going to organize the files and access into SharePoint and so forth. Made a good start on that. We'll continue working on that process. The county doesn't have a specific deadline set for bringing this all to conclusion, so we're expecting that the project's going to continue into 2019 and roll out for the health department will actually probably go on into 2020. So for the department, we're just in very early preliminary stages. They're working with us, with key staff to help figure out, again, what's that SharePoint structure going to look like. We haven't actually started moving over a lot of files yet for the department as a whole. We'll keep moving forward with that as time goes by. So some of the ideas about doing this are we can save money. Using these different products will supposedly help improve access to files versus the old network file structure approach, and also come up with some new ways to make information more available, not only internally, but across the county, and then to a certain extent more available and accessible by the public. So.
I have a question, comment, whatever, only because I just got in trouble for doing it myself. Have we had the county attorney or some other group look through all of our obligations with the federal government and make sure that we don't actually have to have physical secure control of it? I moved some stuff to the cloud, and in my contract it was put in that if I was going to keep digital files, I was required to keep physical control of the machines that actually possess those files. And so that's something we might want to check through all of our obligations for everything on as we're doing this transition, because I got in trouble for moving everything off and not actually being physically, during an audit, it was found I was not in physically control of the machine that held the data. And so it's something we should probably look through and determine, and I'm sure there's a million different government contracts. There's probably 3 years of looking through contracts and grants and all that stuff that exists, so.
We've looked at that, I've looked at that for PHC in the health department with regard to protected health information.
Okay.
And,
HIPAA
you know,
compliant
when
stuff,
you're
yeah.
looking at protected health information on your phone or on your home computer and trying to find some controls for that. But I'm telling you, it's a nightmare because you have that physical control piece, but then you have more and more people utilizing mobile devices and non-office devices, but you do have security obligations for those devices and home computers. So it's definitely something that should be on everyone's mind when they're thinking about the transfer. And just thinking generally about information in a health context.
It was one line in one contract that said I had to be in physical control of that machine that stored the data. And so because I moved it to Amazon Web Service Cloud, I was not in physical, I don't even know where that machine was. It could have been in a foreign country.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where it's at or where it's cloned, and then so that violated that part of the contract.
Well, there's a attorney assigned to information services too, for all their work. I'm not sure who it is.
It's Matt.
It's Matt.
I'm always worried about a nuanced thing that you have with a government, a federal agency that's providing funding or something. There could be a line in some sub-clause in a contract that all of a sudden we get in violation of.
Well, when some of us were on our own doing cloud things, we got pulled back. I was one of them, believe it or not. So I do know that there was a process involving the county attorney's office for the county to proceed.
Okay, cool.
The only other update, and it's really not specific to this goal, but it's part of it, is I want to give you an update every month on where our microphone sonic system is coming so that we don't do manual minutes here. And all the components have been ordered, they're being compiled, they're not in Missoula yet. And actually, your February meeting, I think because of the refurbishing, won't be in this room, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it could be March, when we actually get to switch to that system, but oh, we can't wait.
Yeah, I bet.
It's just like climbing out of quicksand, you know,
Yeah.
so. Okay.
All right, so I guess now we move on to item 5, journal report.
Okay.
Pam.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and then I was watching the wildfires in California, and I thought, let me see if I can find something about wildfires, because we're having so much issue with them, especially in Sealy Lake and stuff this last summer. And so I started doing some research, and all the things that kept coming up were things that we know about, the respiratory and cardiac issues that are associated with this. But then this nice little article popped up that piqued my interest, and it's called The Exposure to Particulate Air Pollution and Cognitive Decline in Older Women. And it was published in the Archive of Internal Medicine in 2011. And the reason it piqued my interest is because there has been a lot of study that's being done in Mexico City on air pollution, particulate matter that it started out looking at dogs and the behavior in dogs, and then expanded into the behavior in children, and found that there were cognitive effects in the children as much as a couple of years of learning in children who were exposed to Mexico City's air compared to children who were in a mountain place where there was fresh air that was no minimal pollution. So it just triggered my interest. And so, as we know, particulate matter in forest fires is the biggest thing that is a problem. But there's also other stuff in it. So there's, carbon monoxide and formaldehyde and benzene, and those are the primary chemicals that are in it as well. And so I thought, well, could it be something that we need to look at if we're having repeated forest fires every summer, and if we are having residents who not only are exposed to forest fire, but to wood fires in the wintertime. And so what is there a potential that this could have a cognitive decline? So that's how I got all interested in this article. And so the article basically looked at 19,409 U.S. women between the ages of 70 and 81 who were participants in the Nurses' Health Study cognitive study. So as part of an ongoing study for nurse health that had started back in the 1970s, and these women had been followed for years. And it looked at the particulate matter that they were exposed to short term, which was a month or less, and long term, which was 7 to 14 years of exposure. So 2 different groups. And it looked at particulate matter that was relatively small and relatively large, and looked at if there were any differences in the cognitive functioning of women who were exposed to that. So the particulate matter wasn't as small as the particulate matter that we're exposed to when we're exposed to forest fires. That particulate matter is less than 1 micron, so it's 0.4 to 0.7 microns, so very small. This study looked at particulate matter that was at 2.5 and then at 10. And so that was the smallest was 2.5. And what it found was that the higher the exposure, the longer the exposure to the particulate matter, the higher the cognitive loss was. And so it did not matter what the particulate size was, so it was equal in small size and large size as well, but it did look at the height of the exposure that they had. And so there was a decline that was seen as much as 2 years, equivalent to the 2 years of aging in cognitive function in the women who had been exposed long-term.
Does long-term mean short-term repeated, or does long-term mean 7 months?
Excellent question. So for this, it was just long-term. But I do think that as part of looking at this study and looking to us, it raises questions about how does intermittent cumulative exposure affect us. And we don't have that answer, and I couldn't find any research that talked about it, but I think it would be a really interesting way to guide the research that is being done out of Seeley Lake, because
We
there's
should do that. We should do that.
Well, it would be, yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that I think could be really applicable to what we're
Yeah.
seeing here, and in California, other places too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not
The research on
place.
cumulative, well, the research on acute and episodic exposure is pretty rich. Different age groups, different types of exposure, and the immediate effects as well as long-term effects. But the literature that we searched for cumulative exposure is not present.
It isn't there,
Not-
and it
not
isn't
in
there
any
for
helpful way.
cognitive stuff, so it is there for,
Yeah.
it's there for respiratory and cardiovascular, but it isn't there for cognitive. And, you know, to me, this seems like kind of a big
Yeah.
deal if we're affecting, if you look at, okay, long-term cognitive decline in the elderly, but also if it has a potential for causing cognitive decline in our children, to the point where, and the study in Mexico also connected behavioral studies, or behavioral issues with the exposure. So it wasn't just cognitive, but it was also behavioral issues. And so they're looking at this as a couple of different ways of getting into the body. One, that it could just be absorbed into the bloodstream and then transported systemically. The other is that it goes in intranasally and moves into the brain that way. And so looking at how are we affected by this as well. And also that it could be affected by cardiovascular mechanisms, because the inflammation that happens when we're exposed to particulate matter can cause that to be an issue as well. So I just thought that it was really interesting study that gives us maybe some thought about what we should and could be looking at when we're studying the effects of the fires that we're having.
There's some
Did you
very
say
good.
some research is being done now in Seeley
Mhm.
Lake? Who's doing that?
Well, there's people who I can't come up with their names, and then there's folks that are closer to the public health school that I can. So Curtis Noonan, Tony Ward, Aaron Simmons.
So they're local?
Yeah, And then, I think it's once a year, they have that, I can't think of the name of the gathering, but once a year. Yeah, they get together and share research on air quality. Yeah, I haven't been to one.
Do you know if they're considering this cumulative episodic?
I don't know if they're considering it, and I certainly don't know that they're considering it in terms of this particular health outcome. I do know that they've struggled but up and managed to at least do some data gathering and some testing up in Seeley Lake when we did have the event I know Ben and Sarah helped make that happen. And that they've got some preliminary results from that, but again, that's acute exposure. The stuff that's been ongoing in terms of looking at internal, in-home exposure to wood stove smoke, particularly on children, they've been doing that for a long time, yeah.
Years ago, I read a cumulative study on mapping with interstates and the particulate off the tires and the diesel exhaust. So they know there's always like a band around interstates where cognitive function is incredibly low if you live right next to an interstate. And then as you go out from that, and they think that's particulate exposure. I'll see if I can find that study. It's
Or
been
lead.
years since I read it.
There's lead and particulate.
So what's the hypothesis though? Is it accumulation of heavy metals in the brain, or is it degradation of the oxygen environment? What's the hypothesis?
So it's an inflammatory
Inflammation.
effect that then changes what happens. So they think that it increases amyloid deposits because of the inflammation and changes some neural pathways because of the inflammation issue. So it's
Pam, all the way back to the beginning, was this just PM10 and PM2.5 that was resulting from wildfires or just in
no.
general?
So this
Okay,
wasn't.
just-
This just
okay.
cropped up when I
Thanks.
looked up wildfires and health
Okay.
issues.
Just bad air.
So it was just particulate matter. So it's just bad air is basically what they were looking at, not specifically wildfires. But I think that that's something that translates then to our wildfire.
It sounds so close to a road dust study I read, like the road particulate off interstates. It's like,
Yeah.
sounds very close
Yeah.
to it.
I mean, the research in Mexico was done by a professor at the university who is from Mexico herself, and she just started with the dogs, and it's fascinating how dramatic it is in children, and so, I mean, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be in adults as well, and so it is definitely something to.
I think it's hard for people to picture, well, you can't see the particulate, it's so small.
Yeah.
And if you think of your alveoli in your lung, where you actually have the transfer, supposedly it's supposed to be all a gas transfer. But the particulate is so small that the theory is that you actually do have the transfer of the particulate. It's kind of like going through a soap bubble. It's that fragile and that thin, or more so. And then you've got different components in the particulate, depending on what it was that was burned. And then just pure inflammation that doesn't belong there.
So,
Get the
in
immune
autopsies,
response.
they found that that the particulate matter had gone across the blood-brain barrier, and it caused neural degeneration, and it destroyed the glial cells in the brain, and that there was increased amyloid levels. So those were the big things that they found on autopsy.
So just anti-inflammatories for everybody all the time.
That's why I said, do we start telling everybody, start loading up in their vitamin D,
Fish oil.
and
I'm gonna go with stronger than
taking
that.
Well, and an anti-inflammatory diet, and then, reducing smoking,
Get out.
obviously, and exercise, and all of the things that we know can reduce
I mean, does this-
inflammation.
Would this sort of thing change our idea on when people should evacuate an area?
Yes, I think it would. I think it definitely. And think if the people in Sealy Lake, I mean, if we could prove that there was definitely a connection to that kind of thing, if you had told those people, well, you are going to have cognitive decline, like a person who has Alzheimer's, if you stay here, that's like a whole different thing than staying.
We
"Oh,
were
it's gonna
up
make
in
you
that
sick."
gym several times, and people just were hacking at us, and mostly worried about their home burning. Perception of risk and communication of risk is the whole
Yes.
next step.
Yes. But I just thought so.
Yeah.
I have the article here if anybody would like to look at it, and with references and all of that kind of stuff, but I didn't make copies.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Pam. So then we move on to identifying journal report for our next meeting.
We
I
have,
think I can do it.
Oh.
I think I'm here.
we have a new board member, but that's great.
He's
We'll give him a
kind of-
couple months.
He's kind of busy.
I mean, you can go really ridiculous. I mean, I went ridiculous. So,
Deb jumped up real quick, so.
No, we've had more ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll go after Deb.
trust me.
Sounds good.
We've
Looking
had,
forward to both of them.
Yeah.
we've had
I'm-
way more
Mhm.
ridiculous.
I'll just have to amp it up next time.
This is
Not to
very
put-
much not ridiculous.
Not to put Ed
Not to
Childers
put-
on the
Yeah.
spot, but I will never forget.
He's not the only one.
It's up here.
Not to put any pressure on new board members about bars for journal reports, because some of us try to keep them low.
They're always interesting.
Anyways, then we move on to item 6, legislative update. Ellen.
Okay. We have a couple of large systems that we are involved with here at the health department. The county system, we do keep in touch with the city system, but try not to completely duplicate all efforts. And then we are participants and in many cases leaders and members of the legislative committee for a joint public health lobby. And that joint lobby is made up of the Association of Montana Public Health Officials, so it's AMFO, and I'm a representative for that, Montana Public Health Association, and Montana Environmental Health Association. And what's going on at the moment that we have our eyes on or are interested in, trying to find more about. Shannon went over someday this week on House
Wednesday.
Bill, was it Tuesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, oh, and you are here. No, she was here yesterday.
Oh, it was Tuesday?
Shannon, do you want to give like a really brief, because this is the only one, everything else that I'm going to talk about is LC. So House Bill 55?
Okay, so House Bill 55 is some changes to the Sanitation and Subdivision Act. And this is a continuation of House Bill 507 from the last session. House Bill 507 last session started out not good. We worked with DEQ to make some really important changes, but the thing that's most interesting is all of the changes that it made to the Sanitation and Subdivision Act last session were temporary. So they were going to sunset in October of this year if something wasn't done. So it kind of forced it to have interim process, and DEQ put together something called the Sanitation or Subdivision and Development Advisory Committee, Advisory Council, excuse me. And that group looked at how to implement these changes, which they were just, it put in some additional ways for developers, consultants, and the reviewers to talk, really. That's really what it did. But in the meantime, we also looked at, are there any ways that we can improve the process? And one of those, one of the guiding principles there was that if the process is not adding value, it's not adding environmental protection, or it's not adding public health protection, let's get rid of it. And we were a champion of that throughout the interim. And there are some things that are making it easier now for development to use connection to both municipal water and to district water and sewer. So municipal water or sewer, district water and sewer with less process. Or once it's already approved, that they can connect to water, municipal water or district water or sewer without having to go back to review. So there are some things like that. There were also other clarifications and stuff, but it's all good. And so as a result, everybody who got up and talked were proponents. Even the people who had some concerns with the bill met with DEQ beforehand, and then there's going to be a few amendments that are going to be discussed by the Subdivision and Development Advisory Council at the end of the month, and then those will be brought back by the sponsor. So there's a lot of buy-in to the process, which is probably how most bills should go through, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was really frightening.
It was really bad to begin with, and
difficult.
it ended up being very
2 years
positive.
ago, so all of our work 2 years ago was trying to get it to slow down from DEQ up to allow this process to happen. So that's House Bill 55, sponsored by Mandeville. And actually, at this point, it's actually a department-requested bill, DEQ.
It is. It
Yeah.
started out as a Mandeville bill, and he's
Yeah.
still the sponsor and is very respectful and supportive of the process, too.
That's good. The rest are, well, the next two are LCs. They are not bill drafts yet, so they haven't been introduced, so it's harder to know about them. One that is the most vague, which can also make it seem the most worrisome, or benign, depending what mood you're in when you read the bill title, is only a bill title, and that's from, I think it's a representative, not a senator, Zolnikoff out of Yellowstone, and it's to change health board authorities. And it is in reaction to the vaping rule that the Yellowstone Health Board put into effect. They did prevail, Yellowstone did, on all of the court proceedings to date. They have been sued, but there's some angry folks. So as we understand it now, again, nothing in writing, this bill is not looking to narrow its focus on just smoking and vaping. It's looking to have a wider focus on health board authorities, which is very worrisome. So we're keeping a close eye on that to see what it really is once something comes out. We're working very actively with an unintroduced, but we do have proposed language for the working group only LC, and that's proposed by Walt Sales, not Scott Sales, and Walt Sales is out of Bozeman, and focusing on, once again, raw milk. So round 4 with raw milk. This is attempting to be a compromise bill, and there are parts of it that maybe you couldn't compromise your way into, and there's parts that the science just doesn't support. So we're working on that now, having lots of conversations. We have skin in the game, and that we're part of the team sitting down trying to make a compromise, but we are the one member of the team that is, and the team is made up mostly of folks that helped us defeat in the other 3 sessions. So they've moved, not in a wholesale way, but they've moved because they believe that if we don't fix this, it's always going to be there. I believe we do have to show some movement and be less polarized. I don't think that if we compromise that we'll never deal with this topic again. I simply have not ever had that experience in the legislature. But that said, a lot of soul searching, even amongst our own gang, on where we could really come out on this.
Could you tackle it from, I don't know what angles you're tackling it from because I don't know the details, but could you go from a quality perspective, like it has to pass this kind of microbiology testing or whatever? You can sell it all day long as it passes these quality specs?
Yeah.
Which would require it to be pasteurized to pass the quality specs?
Yeah.
I mean, to be the microbiologist who's being a smart ass, right?
That's the
I mean,
problem.
that's
The
way.
science doesn't support that, which is why laws for pasture. I mean, you just can't eliminate that risk or get it down low enough. You can get it down low enough if you sell in really low numbers and you say, okay, we're going to have a couple people are sacrificed. Maybe they may be volunteer themselves to be the ones that take the risk. They may wish that risk.
I've never tested raw milk that didn't have E. coli and listeria in it, ever. I've never seen one sample.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Of thousands of samples I've tested,
Right.
never seen one sample that did not fail micro.
Right. So being on MCAT here and knowing that there's other talks going on right now while I'm sitting here would not be a good time,
Yeah.
except to, in a general way, say, I believe and many believe, ridiculous, we should think before believe is my opinion, but we do have a black market. There are aspects in the conversation that we're having that there could be some benefit of bringing the black market, regulating it so it has the least amount of risk.
I know people that go to
we can
Arlea
see
and
it.
buy raw milk.
Yeah.
So
And we
I
deal
will,
with
I will
outbreaks.
confirm that I know there's a black market for raw milk.
You can just go on the Facebook page and you can get yourself a quart if you want.
And what is the bill number, the draft?
It's an
license bill?
LC number, and right when I was
The one
going
for
to
the-
write it
The
down,
one for the health departments.
I don't have the LC number. My system froze up when I went to write them down. I will have them memorized within
So
weeks.
Just to let you know, that guy, he
It's
has
zone of cough.
3 bills that are in, 59 on draft. So I don't know how serious he is about pursuing one thing or the other.
He has talked, I have secondhand reports that
And that's not one that he's actually pushed in yet, so.
they're trying to get him through the funnel at this point, right? They've only been in session a week. So lots of soul searching. Generally, if there's a commercial option and even if it has a lot of testing, when you look at public health, you're really looking at the exponential effect, both in the numbers of exposures. If you could mix together milk from 20 different cows and tracing it back to which cow was sick and how to control it, as soon as you get into large numbers, you've just got more risk. So, and as soon as you get to mixing it and selling it and having that motive to commercially market it, there's a motive to grow. If it doesn't grow, it's not going to be viable. There's also discussion of a very small, on the farm only with limited number of gallons per day, registration, ability to trace, those types of things. Those are the 2 mindsets that are out there right now.
That second one sounds like a way to get the black market into the light of day.
Yes, and that might be one that maybe our colleagues could be supportive of, but the commercial one, so we do run the risk as if we don't support the commercial option. Right now, it's a sight unseen, knowing what it would look like exactly. But if it's unlimited, the science for raw milk and those amounts of potential exposure hasn't changed. You know, you can
And there's short-term and
compromise-
long-term illness implications of mycobacterium and some of the stuff that might be tied to inflammatory bowel disease and stuff like that that they haven't even coordinated yet, that there's short-term and long-term risks to raw
Oh,
milk.
yeah, you got some sick kids. Well, anyhow, so that's what's going on. And then we do have one that has been introduced, and I am sorry, I went to double check the number, because once I start working them, the numbers get emblazoned in your head, but while they're changing numbers, I don't track them as well. And this is an example of when past defeats and past compromises maybe only give you a year break. So we have now coming the 4th round of pharmacists wanting to be able to give any and all immunizations without any health provider oversight order or anything. They already have the ability to have a collaborative agreement with a physician that gives them standing orders. That's basically what we operate under.
What does that mean, standing?
A standing order, you don't have a doctor sitting on staff saying, you know, writing a script, but this kid at this age should get the CDC recommended or required vaccine unless they have certain indications, maybe an allergy. And so we have standing orders, and then you do quality assurance and, you know, train for that. The pharmacies, and it's really the corporate pharmacies, the big box shops, wish to continue to move down the age, all the way down to infants, and broad across all the vaccines that they can give. So this is our 4th go-round. Those of you that have been around a while would remember that Dr. Tom Roberts on the board was instrumental in defeating it one time and compromising it, you know, so it would never come back. The last time this was up, so.
And here it is.
Here we go again. And they usually talk about it as a way to increase the vaccination rate, but there's no evidence that it does that, because when the kids come here and and the parents want the records, we have no idea what they got when they went to pharmacy A, B, C, D.
And that's the main argument against it, is the lack of records, or is it that?
No, I don't think
quality
any,
isn't there? Is that-
I believe it's a scope of practice issue. I believe that, just like the pharmacists, that we currently have scope of practice under the medical board, the nursing boards, the pharmacy boards, on who actually either diagnoses or recommends either a therapy or a preventive activity, and then orders it. And it's not pharmacists, and it's not nurses. I think the fact they, you know, well, we can do it, we can give shots. They have shelves full of drugs that they know a lot about. Is that also okay, you know, for them to say, well, I think you could use this antibiotic, or I think you could take this preventive or this, but to me, I don't see a difference. And it's definitely, it's the corporate big box pharmacies across the country that are driving it.
So I'll give a counterpoint to it, just because it's pharmacist. So there are times when you are the sole provider,
Mhm.
and I bet having a touch is better than no touch at all.
Mhm.
I will say that. So the gap is, most retail pharmacies don't have a holding room. Most retail pharmacies don't. So if you have an injection and you need someone to stay for half an hour to an hour, they don't have that facility, and that's an important component when you give someone an injection. Sometimes there's a lot of reasons. If they would invest in a records system that you could access.
Well, they
right?
could right now use the state registry. They
Right.
don't.
Right, so if there would be a compromise there, is if they would invest or get trained on your system and use your system, then I can see where it could potentially work. Or if you could likewise get into their adjudication system for claims, because they are running them through insurance now, and then you could get a record. But again, it's not a complete historical record, so you don't know how often someone's been immunized or what their reaction was, right? I mean, I understand that side of
Yeah.
it, but.
But they
you
can
have
do
to-
them. This is my point. They can give vaccinations under a collaborative agreement with the doctor. They want to do it without. They want to enlarge their scope of practice for these commercial purposes. So if you're the only pharmacy out in 2 Dot, you know, an argument can be made, well, you know, this is where I have to go to get my flu shot, or I have to travel to my county seat or whatever. They can have a collaborative agreement with a physician and get the same standing orders we use. They don't want to have to do that, and they have difficulty getting physicians to agree to put their medical license and their liability on humongous commercial efforts where they really aren't the doctor of record. So that's what's happening, is they want to get past that barrier.
And the problem with not having that is that they don't have the knowledge about the different medical issues that might be counterindicating the vaccination. And so, you know, and they don't. And
Right.
But then I will say, sometimes the pharmacist is the only person with a medical history on a patient.
Maybe.
sometimes.
So there may be room for compromise, but.
Well, we did. We compromised last time. We came way down in age and got it to the point where they wouldn't be giving any live vaccines, because sometimes women are pregnant, things like that. So that's coming around. Do I sound frustrated? Yes. But that's why I'm not saying we don't try to get unpolarized on raw milk, but I am not motivated by the discussion that we'll fix it now and we'll never
Totally
have to do
gets
it
raw milk,
again.
just say that.
So that's the legislative update. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the daycare bill?
Oh, 113?
Yeah.
Do you want to just mention that?
Mention it?
Thanks.
So there's also another bill, it's House Bill 113, it was heard also on Tuesday, and it is updating a bunch of the daycare, Child Care Act, and DPHHS says they have to do it in order to keep their federal block grant that is $30 million that supports daycares. So daycares don't pay a license fee, and they have a Best Beginnings grant program that helps 6,000 families and 8,000 kids with child care finances. So, and then there's some other parts of the program that they support through this big block grant. But the big change in this bill would be that it would bring drop-in daycares into the fold. If you'll remember, those who've been on the council for a long time, or the board for a long time, the board adopted drop-in child care regulations because there were none in the state. And so we do in Missoula require registration. They could choose to license through the state, or they can register through the health department. But that, because of the limits of your authority, all that the health board could require is items that are preventing communicable disease. So there are things like background checks and the number of attendants that need to be available at a drop-in daycare, safety standards that don't apply to drop-in daycare. So this would bring those into the fold. There's a large, there were lots of proponents, but there were also lots of opponents, and really the argument for the opponents was that this would require vaccinations of children who wanted to go to drop-ins, which are required in Missoula, by the way, but are not required outside of Missoula, Missoula and Yellowstone, because they adopted similar regulations to yours. So that has had its first hearing, and we'll have to see where it goes, but it's something that is important and that we're watching.
Yeah, thanks.
What about Medicaid expansion?
Medicaid expansion.
The issue of the session.
Yeah, it seems to, Dunwell's bill was introduced on Tuesday, right?
What
So you
bill is
probably,
that? What bill is that?
I think you probably are more
Well, I
in
don't
track
know.
with that.
I don't know what's happening behind the scenes.
Oh,
though.
I don't know what's happening behind the scenes either.
What's the
No.
bill?
Okay. The bill is to expand Medicaid and so that we don't have to have any more sunset.
Yeah, it's to continue
Just
the,
So it takes
continue the
steps for
expansion.
continuous, so
Same
that
thing
we
the
don't have to
initiative
go
was,
back
right?
every couple of years and have this whole
Yeah.
fight all over again. So
Yeah.
it's to change the criteria for being on Medicaid actually is what it is, so.
Yeah. So there will be other bills introduced, those that may even wish to support continuing the expansion. but to introduce other barriers, what they consider various checks on it not being used fraudulently and means testing. So I expect that there'll be Republican bills introduced.
So are the health departments around the state?
Yeah. Yeah, we get involved in that. We aren't necessarily, sometimes one of us is a lead on that, but we are actually in a much larger alliance, the Healthy Montana Alliance, for that kind of work. And, this kind of stuff we kind of do on our own.
So one of the things that Montana Women's Vote is trying to do, Women Vote, is trying to do is to get stories, personal stories of people's experience and how that all impacts them. And they are looking for women, particularly in the harder places, to get this to go. So Billings and Great Falls,
Right.
Primarily. Would it be possible for me to get contact information for the health departments in Billings and Great Falls?
Sure.
To reach out to them to see if we could have them kind of be part of trying to gather some of those stories?
Yeah, I would give you the policy person in Yellowstone. Great Falls Health Department is the only of the large health departments that often isn't actively involved in some of this stuff.
Well,
but I do know who the contact would tell
But there
you.
may be a person there.
No, there is.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah, okay, that'd be great.
I have a quick question back on the daycare one too. So during the kind of unvaccinated outbreak stuff, the whooping cough and stuff, was there any correlation between like drop-in daycares or childcare in the areas that didn't have a requirement for vaccines and any transmission there?
There's a correlation between unvaccinated, obviously, but I don't have anything down to that level of detail.
I was just wondering if there was any contact tracing that occurred that could say like, was it Corvallis or whatever that had the whooping cough thing? Was there like a drop-in daycare or anything like that, or something like that
No,
that could have been
whole
traced?
like the Pinedale population, for example,
Oh,
is
and-
just a largely unimmunized
Yeah.
population. So I don't have it down where you can say,
I was just wondering
this
if there
is
was
daycare.
actually like a direct, hey, we had this thing, it was a drop-in,
Yeah.
there was a transmission. We could trace it. Add weight to it, I guess, is my thought.
Um,
Right. Well, I think at this point we roll into the director's report accreditation update.
Okay. I did want to mention when we did introductions, we didn't introduce our member who's not present. Dr. Stenger is the physician board member, and he's actually chosen and appointed by the members of the board. And he is on faculty with U of M in the family practice residency, which is housed at PHC. So he's actually not a county employee, he is a U of M employee. I'm just not able to be here today. Yesterday, we did this really goofy but neat thing with the city council. We had the management team, which, as you know, is relatively new to their positions, but not new to the department. And the city council come over here and we did speed dating. So we spent an hour where in 2-minute intervals, people asked and answered questions of each other on a one-on-one format. So no dog and pony shows, very face-to-face. And then I had the bell, and when the bell rang, you had to get up and go to the next seat. And then we are still in the process I've collected some input, of getting input for some follow-up meetings where we'll have more informal but deeper dives into issues based on the kinds of conversation that we had. And all the reports I've gotten so far were that it was...
Yeah, it went great. Ellen really likes her bell.
I know, I know. I never had a bell before, or whistle, or, a lash or anything, and they've mutinied my bell away. Yeah, that's the only time they're gonna let me have it. But you guys wouldn't move. Your 4 minutes was up, and you were just going at it.
This was the
So,
management team.
yeah,
and the
it was
city
12
council.
on 12, and it was,
I was just thinking it would have been great if Josh was there.
I would love
yeah,
that.
it was
Yeah.
highly engaging. It was just, people couldn't stop. They'd be moving and still talking to this person, and then I'd start hitting my bell. So, but we will have some outcomes from that too, so we can. I have morphed a staff orientation set of modules. I'm starting to morph it to use select modules and additional modules for board orientation, because we now have the majority of our board is relatively new. Zach is the guinea pig. I sent him the link. He's not able to open it yet, but I would, I'll give you some feedback on that, and I might ask any of you, certainly the more recent appointees, to take a look at some of those modules to help hone it for the next new person. So you don't just get word of mouth, and for accreditation, you do have to have some sort of process for orientation.
And what does all the accreditation stuff do? I'm totally spacing my brain. I had it written down. I can't remember now.
We must have our application in no later than March 31st. We are shooting for March 7th.
Okay.
And we have a few more, we had about 80% of our drafts done by the end of the calendar year, so we're finishing drafts and reviews.
I think he's asking why we do it.
No, I wanted to actually know what, I knew it was coming up, and I was like, wait, isn't it supposed to be, for some reason, I was
Yeah.
thinking next month, not March.
So one of the things I put into this orientation module is that briefest fact sheets on each of the 12 domains. That's something, when we get you into it, you'll be able to see.
Great.
It's not a deep dive that you just would die. We die when we deep dive in it. It's so hard. But I think it might be helpful to sometime in the near future do an hour session with those of you that are interested, that didn't go through the first accreditation, and kind of sit down and,
Let's make it happen.
yeah. I know you've been through other accreditations, but
Yeah,
this one has its own,
I'm sure it does.
yeah. Okay, and we started the refurbishing, and that's one of the reasons up here. And that's one of the reasons Travis is used to running up and down 3 sets of stairs in a hurry. So we won't have this room available in February. And the last thing is, this is some of the nursing students, not the whole class, are coming in smaller groups. I think that was your idea, Julie. I think that, however that worked out. So these are Montana State University College of Nursing students in their senior year in their public health semester.
They've done a great job remaining awake.
Yeah.
Struggling, but they've been pulling it
There
off.
was some little delays that happened for a while.
That's it, thank you.
All right, thanks, Ellen. Then any public comments and items not on the agenda? Seeing none, any board or staff comments and items not on the agenda?
One of the things I'd like to figure out how to do, and I think I talked about it a couple months ago, is I'm always on the kind of cutting edge of what's going on with technology and everything that's going on. And I can't keep up, so I have no idea how public health is going to keep up. And so one of the things I'd like to figure out how to do, maybe with university professors, and I don't want to create another advisory council or anything, but I'd like to figure out how to get it to where we can kind of like routinely get the board updated and the public health department updated on just like cutting edge stuff. So while it looks like bear feces, it's not. This is actually, this is plastic that's fully biodegradable, made completely from industrial hemp. We destroyed the injection molding machine, but nonetheless, when it lit on fire. However, like the pace of it.
So what was this supposed to be?
It's supposed to be a jar.
Okay.
Before the fire. Silicone melts really quick, I've learned, and,
So is that made 100%?
100% from hemp. So-
Which now, due to.
Farm Bill is-
Rules is.
Yeah,
you're on
it's-
all one.
I put a joke on LinkedIn. I said, I'm taking pre-orders for,
Was it gonna be clear?
no, it wasn't always intended, but I put a joke up there. I was like, I'm taking pre-orders for, fake bear feces on LinkedIn. If there are any takers,
What
just
would
being,
the environmental conditions be for this to biodegrade?
it's 12 to 18 months in an ocean environment or soil environment where it would break down completely back to the composite fiber, and all the polylactic acid would break
But if
down.
it was a water bottle, would that degrade?
Yeah, same idea. I mean, that's not a very pretty water bottle, but somewhat irrelevant from that. Kind of the reason I brought it in, besides it was funny that I lit it, not everyone thinks it's funny. I thought it was funny I lit an injection molding machine on fire. Because we didn't pay attention completely to the auto ignition temperatures of the raw material. You can pass it around. Is like, I'm doing material science work, and like they're bringing ocean plastic in. People are doing all sorts of things, and it's innovating so fast that like and they're not required to do public health or toxicology. There's bypasses on most of this stuff, and if the compounds that are used are GRAS under FEMA, generally regarded as safe, they don't have to do any testing to go into the food supply. And it's self-affirmed, so as a company, I can be like, my stuff's safe, and the FDA says it's safe, and it's in the food supply. And so there's so much changing, and it's not just in material science where I stick in, or pharmaceuticals or whatever. It's occurring in things like, I was part of a presentation for the ethical technology or whatever, and they demonstrated how they could create bots and use those to influence people on social media, all artificial intelligence, and then those people wanted to commit suicide after being exposed to those bots that thinking about suicide rates and stuff, being exposed to just machines influencing your behavior and your whatever from there. And those all have intrinsic public health kind of things. And as we talk about new products and laws being passed and like Denver going to recreational psilocybin potentially, all that kind of stuff that's occurring, and it's going so fast because it's citizen initiative. There needs to be a way for public health to at least get the information to try to consider what's important or not. And like, I'm in it, and like that's what I do, and I can't keep up anymore with what's going on. And so like I'm like, this is kind of going to be a problem. And I think I talked about it with my presentation way back in March or whatever, of like all the stuff that's kind of advancing and occurring. And so I was just in a couple meetings, and I'm like, man, it's crazy how fast everything's moving and how hard it is to keep up. And you know, it'd probably be a little easier to keep up if we were in Seattle or we were in LA or whatever, just because that's where a lot of the innovation's happening. But it's happening there and then going to market 3 months later. And then it's on our shelves. You know, I brought the CBD water, and I was joking, right? That it's like the gas stations are selling this and no one even knows what's going on. You know, that's going to be hard, and I think it's going to be the real challenge for public health next 2 to 6 years, is being able to stay on top of all the innovation that's being funded and what's occurring. You know, and there's projects with artificial intelligence doing predictive things for new products. All the stuff that's occurring out there, it's moving so fast that public health needs to figure out how to work with industry and government and whatever to make sure they can keep up with those paces.
I'm just juxtaposing that picture that you're painting against my legislative list here that's trying to take us 150 years back.
Well, and that's, and the value of public health in the public domain is not very high. And
No.
it's not funded, and it's.
Yeah, I mean, how do you look in both directions?
So the only other thing I was gonna say, and you all probably said this earlier, is congratulations to Ross, he was reappointed.
Yes.
Oh yes,
thank
congratulations
you.
to Ross.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank God for keeping Ross on the board.
It's always interesting. It's always interesting. All right, any other board or staff comments and items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will adjourn as the Board of Health and convene as the Air Pollution Control Board. And I'm assuming we don't have December 20 minutes again. So then we will go on to item 2, which is another letter for us to look at and consider approving, which is a comment letter on EPA's advance notice of proposed rulemaking regarding the 2015 new source performance standards for residential wood heaters. Ben's going to walk us through that.
Benjamin Schmidt with the Air Quality Division, or program here at the Health Department. What we have here is a letter that the Air Quality Advisory Council is requesting that you sign on to and submit to the EPA. To summarize the letter, the EPA has put out a notice, an advance notice, that they are going to look at the 2015 new source performance standards for wood heaters. This would include pellet stoves, wood stoves, hydronic heaters, wood-fired air furnaces, everything of that nature. So this is not a rule change. This is a going out and requesting comments from the general public on the specific rule changes, on the 2015 NSPS. Normally, NSPS is by law supposed to be looked at every 8 years. They're doing this one a little bit early. They specifically have 8 points that they are asking for public comment on. And we drafted this, and the Air Quality Advisory Council is really only having 4 points that they would like to have you address in this letter. There are several things here that deal more with the laboratories and things that don't directly impact Missoula County. Now, the purpose of this letter, or the reason that this letter is important, is because anything new that's put in, any wood-burning devices put into this adds to the pollution in our valleys. It doesn't matter if it's 9 Mile, Clinton, Sea Lake, everywhere in this county, we are either at the ambient standard or close to the national ambient air quality standard for smoke or PM 2.5 in the air. So this is important to us. Any changes to do that 15 NSPS that potentially go backwards or allow devices that put out more smoke is not a good thing when you look at the long term, how we're going to keep ourselves in attainment for, in wintertime for all of these valleys that have inversions. The first NSPS for wood stoves was done in the 80s. It took until 2015 to promulgate the second set. And in 2015, the EPA, did a very thorough analysis. They did it so thorough that I was telling people at one point in time that the new NSPS will be out around 2010. I missed by 5 years. The EPA did a very good job in that rewrite. They involved all the manufacturers. They got public comment. They did a very thorough job. And they determined at that time that going to what we call the step 2 or phase 2 in 2020 rules really wasn't something the industry could accomplish in 2015. But they felt that they could accomplish those rules given a 5-year notice to up their game. And in that intervening time, whether it's a furnace, hydronic heater, wood stoves, pellet stoves, there are devices in each of these categories that do meet those step 2 standards. So the 4 items that we are commenting on in this letter that we're requesting is that, number 1, maintain at a minimum the 2015 NSPS step 2 emission limits for basically wood-fired devices across the board. We don't see any reason with all the notice given to these, the industry to backslide in this new look at the 2015 rules. Number 2, keep the 2020 compliance date for the step 2 emission limits. There's a big movement out there to allow industry not just totally abandon the 2020 standard that's approaching, but to delay it by 1 to 3 years or something of that nature. So in this comment, we're saying, no, we don't want to delay. This is important to Western Montana valleys. It's important to many other parts of the country to keeping under that particular standard. Number 3 and 4 have to do with cordwood. The testing methodologies and everything like that for showing a device meets certain emission standards for cordwood isn't there yet. 3 and 4 are basically saying we would like that cordwood test to be remained in the 2015 NSPS and also keep looking at approaches to make it become the standardized test. Right now the testing methodology is cribwood. That's kiln dried wood, put in there into the wood stover device in a very specific fashion. It's good to do it that way because you get a repeatable test that's fair and you're comparing apples to apples to apples. It unfortunately doesn't even come close to mimicking the real world. And so there's a balance between real world operation and what can be done in a laboratory to give a fair and repeatable test. And we just would, in comments 3 and 4, would say, hey, getting to a cordwood testing methodology is important. And there's 8 points that they're actually asking for comments on, but those are the 3 that we have put out
Really all types of cordwood and all its various purposes.
Yeah, it is not a simple solution. And I will admit that the 2020 standard for wood stoves, because the wood stoves are 2 grams per hour, it is a tough standard. There's a reason that there's concerns from industry. It can be done. It is not a simple tweaking of a wood stove. It usually involves a thorough re-engineering of a wood stove and how it's made, but it can be accomplished. My opinion is that the wood stove industry has known, before 2010, that new standards were coming along before then, and in 2015, they again had worked for years with the EPA, and we had knew these new standards were coming before they were actually promulgated in 2015. So there's been a lot more head or warning shots than just the 5 years.
So is meeting the new, would meeting the 2020 standards be kind of a mix of wood stove technology and control over fuels?
No, it's based purely on the standard test that's been in place since the 1980s.
So
It's all the technology.
just it's technology side.
So,
Thank you.
so does that mean that a stove that technologically met the 2020 standards could burn dang near any wood products and still meet the standards?
No, it would mean that under the specific testing criteria, which is the cribwood at this time,
Right.
it could meet certain emission limits. Then when you take that to the real world, and there's been a lot of ensuing studies looking at, well, what is the comparison between these, let's call it EPA certified devices and less efficient devices? The EPA ones, even in the real world, totally outperform the older wood stove technology. There are some user learning curves that have to occur. For instance, if you have an older stove, this is called a big box, you throw a bunch of wet wood in there, you fire it up, it's going to smolder away, it's going to put out a lot of smoke, and it's going to heat. You try to do that same thing to a lot of EPA certified devices, they are not designed to burn wet wood. They'll sit there and think, I can't get a fire lit, I can't keep this thing going. So people have to then have a learning curve where they figure out that using dry wood actually can give you a longer fire because of the technology that changes where it can be dampered down and still burn cleanly once it's been heated up, burn cleanly and give you that long burn rate. Because that's really what people want overnight or when they're gone for the day. And they need is a fire that will keep going for a long time. In the old wood stoves, that behavior to accomplish that is totally different than in the newer stoves.
Looking for a motion, since this is an action item, we'd be looking for a motion to,
Make a motion to accept the letter and to what it says that.
so we've got a motion on the floor. Any board or staff comments or discussion on the motion?
I have no comments on the letter, it's just an observation that I'm sort of appreciating the difference in the writing style between the two letters we're signing today from the Water Quality Board and the Air Quality Pollution Board. And I would like to, in the future, to sort of turn this on its head. I mean, I would love for this to say in the first sentence that the Air Quality Pollution Control Board opposes any delay or weakening of the 2015 NPS standard. Just come right out and say, this is where we stand, and then get into the dialogue. You know, we wait. I get concerned at the length that we're getting lost. If we say it in the first sentence, then it might, then they'll say, okay, I'll put in this in the opposed pile and we'll figure out how to respond to it. But I mean, the letter's great and it has everything I would expect if we can just put that, you know, sort of our,
Lead with what?
Yeah.
With your position.
yeah, thank you.
Do you
Any
want me to
other?
amend my motion?
No, I don't want to change it. It's fine. Just an observation.
Any other board or staff comments on the motion? Any public comments on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, Ben. With that, we're done with our action items and we move on to our Quality Advisory Council update. And Ben, you're still up.
Yeah, the primary update was the letter you just saw there. The second item that I was asked to mention was that all the members of the Air Quality Advisory Council that need a reappointment appointed are requesting to be reappointed and to sit at this time.
And I believe I signed those reappointment letters at the beginning of the meeting today, because that's not it's a chair item, not an action item, so I signed those letters at the beginning of the meeting, and Sarah's got the signed letters already.
And the only other thing that really happened at the meeting was they also looked at an article dealing with decreased cognitive skills.
Oh.
China.
Oh, from China?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a deal.
It explains a lot of things that are going on.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's just in Mexico and China.
Yeah, not here at all.
Yeah.
Let the EPA do what they do.
Well, with that, we move into item 4, the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee update. Debbie, are you gonna?
Yeah, the meeting was yesterday. It was Josh's first meeting as well on PPCC. It was a shorter meeting because really the comments had been taken up before on the pedestrian facilities master plan. That's a document that really strives to plan out for the future, how we're gonna get connected, safe, accessible pedestrian facilities all over our community. And we were just picking up a few last comments from the December meeting to get them into the plan that was accepted. I think the other thing that happened earlier in the day that wasn't TPCC, but it had some press, so for those of you who saw it, there was a great tour and audit, especially of the downtown pedestrian facilities that included a number of people of all abilities, and just highlighting, this tour involved the consultants that are working on the downtown master plan updates, and this is really intriguing to me as a consultant that can work on projects like this, that additional tours be done that involve consultants who design these things for our communities. Just to see these live, I think, is really helpful to understand the barriers for access. So more of those are going to go on of the audits. So I think that's exciting. So it was a pretty short meeting, but that was the main topic.
All right. Thanks, Deb. Well, with that, we move into any public comments on items not on the agenda. Any board or staff comments on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll adjourn as both the Air Pollution Control Board and adjourn as all boards today. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
We will be